She told everyone at dinner. He's sweet, but sweet doesn't build extraordinary lives. I smiled politely, paid for everyone's meals, and quietly walked away from the relationship forever. A year later, those same friends were sending me congratulations messages after my company announcement appeared across national business news headlines. He's sweet. He really is. But sweet doesn't build extraordinary lives. She said it with a laugh. Light. Casual. Like she was commenting on the weather. The table went quiet for exactly 1 second, and then everyone smiled, nodded, and moved on like nothing had happened. Like I wasn't sitting right there. Like I hadn't just paid for the appetizers she ordered without asking. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow sip, set it back down, smiled. Not because it didn't land. It landed perfectly, right in the center of something I'd been quietly ignoring for months. I smiled because some things don't deserve a response in the moment. They deserve something slower. I didn't realize it then, but that dinner would eventually come back to me every single time another business publication mentioned my company's name. And they mentioned it often. If you enjoy real stories like this, subscribe, because what happened next changed everything for me. I should back up. My name is Elliot. I was 29 years old when that dinner happened. Living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown with a roommate I barely saw. Working 14-hour days on a software infrastructure startup I'd been quietly building for almost 2 years while simultaneously handling freelance consulting contracts to keep the lights on. From the outside, I know what it looked like. Guy in his late 20s. Average apartment. No title that impressed anyone at a party. No company anyone had heard of. No LinkedIn profile with the kind of numbers that made people lean forward in their chairs. Lauren and I had been together for 3 years and 8 months. I remember the exact number because I'd been mentally calculating it that night at dinner, trying to figure out when things had started feeling different. We met at a rooftop networking event in the West Village. She was laughing at something her friend said, wearing a yellow dress. I introduced myself badly. She found it funny instead of awkward. For the first 2 years, we were good. She believed in me. Or at least, she said she did. I didn't realize that believing in someone and believing in their potential for visible success are 2 completely different things. That distinction took me longer to learn than it should have. The shift was gradual. It didn't happen overnight. It never does with these things. It started with small comments. The kind you can explain away if you're willing to stretch your interpretation. We were at a dinner party. Not the one from the beginning of this story, a different one, maybe 6 months earlier, hosted by her colleague Marcus, who just closed a Series B funding round for his fintech company. Marcus was 31. He had a loft in Tribeca that looked like a magazine spread. He spoke about capital allocation the way other people talk about weekend plans. At some point during the night, Lauren leaned over to me and said, quietly, "See how he just owns the room?" I nodded. "That's what I mean when I talk about presence," she said. I asked her when she'd talked about presence. She looked at me with something I can only describe as patient disappointment. "It comes up, Elliot." I let it go. Looking back, that should have warned me. But I was tired from a 60-hour work week, and the salmon was good, and I told myself she just admired ambition. Which was fine. I admired it too. The problem was she'd started measuring mine against someone else's scoreboard. It escalated quietly over the next few months. A comment here, a comparison there. We were at brunch with her friends, Priya's birthday, the place in Soho with the long wait list, and her friend Dana mentioned that her boyfriend had just gotten promoted to VP of sales at some firm in Midtown. "Oh my God, that's amazing," Lauren said. "You two are killing it." Then she glanced at me, not meanly, just checking, like she was mentally placing me on a shelf and frowning at the label. Dana smiled politely. "What are you working on these days, Elliot?" "Software infrastructure," I said. "Building something of my own." "Oh, cool," Dana said, in the specific tone people use when they mean the opposite. Lauren changed the subject. I noticed. I didn't say anything. That conversation made more sense later. By late spring, the comments had graduated from subtle to specific. We were lying in bed on a Sunday morning, her scrolling through Instagram, when she showed me a post from some tech founder she followed. Guy had just announced his company's Series A, 32 years old. Photo of him at a press conference looking like he'd been born in a blazer. "That's wild, right?" she said. "Good for him," I said. "He started his company the same year you started yours." I looked at her. She shrugged. "I'm just saying." "What are you just saying, Lauren?" She set the phone down. "I'm saying that sometimes I wonder if we're on the same trajectory. That's all." Define trajectory. Don't do that thing where you turn my words into a debate. I'm not debating. I'm asking a direct question. She didn't answer it. She got up, made coffee, and we spent the rest of the morning in the kind of careful silence that both people pretend is fine. I didn't know who she'd been talking to behind my back yet. I found out later. The dinner from the beginning of this story happened on a Friday night in July. Her friends had chosen the restaurant, an Italian place in the West Village, the kind with exposed brick and pasta that costs $32 in candlelight that makes everything feel more significant than it probably is. There were 6 of us at the table. Lauren, me, Dana and her VP boyfriend, whose name was Connor, her friend Jess, who worked in fashion PR, and a guy named Brett, who nobody introduced with a job title because his job was apparently so impressive it needed no context. Something in private equity that he referenced constantly without being asked. I'd met Brett twice before. Both times he'd looked at me like I was a substitute teacher who'd wandered into the wrong school. Dinner started fine. Wine was ordered. Brett arrived. Everyone loosened up. I was actually enjoying myself for the first 40 minutes. Genuine conversation about the city, about a documentary someone had watched, about whether a particular neighborhood had peaked. Then Brett mentioned he was potentially looking at a new apartment in Tribeca. Pre-war building, he said. 12-foot ceilings. The kind of place that makes you feel like you're supposed to be doing something important. Everyone laughed. Where are you guys? He asked, looking between Lauren and me. Midtown, Lauren said. Quickly. Precisely. Like she wanted the information delivered before I could deliver it differently. Midtown's fine, Brett said graciously, in the way that made it clear he considered it provisional. Then Connor asked me how the company was going. Genuinely, I think. Connor was actually decent. Slow build, I said. But we're getting traction. What's the runway look like? Brett asked. Extending it. We've had some conversations with early-stage investors that are moving in the right direction. But no term sheet yet. Not yet. Brett nodded. Looked at Lauren. Some unspoken thing passed between them that I caught and filed away. Lauren smiled at the table and said, He's dedicated. He really is. Pause. He's sweet. He really is. But sweet doesn't build extraordinary lives. Light laughter. Jess smiled into her wine glass. Dana looked down at her pasta. Connor glanced at me once and then found something interesting in the middle distance. Brett looked satisfied. I smiled. I picked up the check when it came without making a production of it. Paid for everyone. Stood up calmly. Said it was a great evening. Drove home. Didn't say a word in the car. Lauren filled the silence with commentary about how the pasta had been slightly overcooked and how Brett was looking at a co-investment opportunity that sounded interesting. She talked the whole way back like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just handed my dignity to a table of people and smiled while she did it. I listened. When we got upstairs, I poured a glass of water, sat on the edge of the bed, and quietly decided something. I didn't announce it. I didn't start an argument. I just decided. The following 2 weeks were strange. Not explosive. Not cold. Just clarifying. I started seeing things without the filter I'd been using. The way she'd stopped asking about the company. Not angrily. She'd just gradually replaced those questions with questions about when certain things would happen. When would there be funding? When would there be press? When would things look different from the outside? The absence of curiosity had been replaced by a timeline. I noticed that when we were with her friends, she introduced me by name now. Not, Elliot's building a company. Just Elliot. I noticed that she'd recently started following a lot of people on Instagram whose lives looked a certain way. Founders with exits. People at galas. Couples at charity events and photographs that looked like they'd been staged by someone with a budget. I noticed that she'd mentioned Brett 3 times in casual conversation since that dinner. Not suggestively. Just frequently. Something about the way her friends reacted that night still bothered me. They weren't surprised by what she said. That was the part one couldn't shake. They nodded like they'd heard the sentiment before. Like it was a position she'd already stated privately, and the dinner had just been the first time it was said out loud, in front of me, because she'd stopped being careful. I brought it up on a Tuesday. We were in the kitchen. She was making tea. I was standing by the window. That thing you said at dinner. I started. She turned around. The sweet comment. She sighed in a very specific way. Elliot, I'm not asking you to apologize. I want to understand what you meant. I meant it as a compliment. No, you didn't. She set the mug down. You're being sensitive. I'm being direct. There's a difference. You always do this. You take one thing and... Lauren. I said her name once. Calmly. Do you actually believe in what I'm building? She was quiet for a moment. Long enough to be its own answer. I believe in you, she said finally. I just sometimes wonder if the path you've chosen is what? Realistic. There it was. Not the word she'd been avoiding. The honest one she hadn't meant to say out loud. I nodded slowly. Okay, I said, and I went back to work. The real conversation came 10 days later. We'd had a quiet weekend. Functional. Polite. The kind of weekend that feels like two people rehearsing the end of something. Sunday evening, she sat down across from me at the kitchen table with the particular posture of someone who'd been practicing sentences in the shower. I've been thinking a lot, she said. I closed the laptop. Gave her my full attention. I think I need someone who's operating at a different level. That sentence. That precise, composed, carefully chosen sentence. I sat with it for a second. Okay, I said. She blinked. Okay. What else would you like me to say? I don't know. I guess I expected. What? For me to argue. She looked genuinely uncertain. Lauren. I leaned forward slightly. You've been saying this for months. You just said it in different ways. I've been listening. That's not fair. I'm not trying to be unfair. I'm telling you that I heard you. And I think you're right. She looked almost injured by that. Like she'd wanted resistance, and I declined to provide it. I think you want something specific, I said. And I don't think it's actually about me. I think it's about what you want your life to look like from the outside. And that's okay. But I can't be someone I'm not to fill that frame. She started to say something. I stood up gently. I hope you find what you're looking for. I genuinely mean that. I walked to the bedroom. I started packing a bag. She stood in the doorway for a moment. Then she walked away. I was out of her apartment by the end of that week. I didn't make a scene about it. Didn't post anything. Didn't call her friends to explain my side. Didn't send the long message I wrote and deleted at 2 a.m. on the third day. I moved into a smaller place in Brooklyn. 1 bedroom. Quiet street. No roommate. I deleted the photos off my phone over the course of several evenings. Not all at once. A few at a time. Each one like closing a small window. I let the grief be what it was. I'd loved her. That was real. What she'd done with that love was her choice. But the love itself was mine, and I let myself feel it ending without trying to make it mean something ugly. Then I went back to work. The next 14 months were the most focused of my life. I stopped going to events I didn't need to be at. Stopped spending energy on social dynamics that weren't moving me forward. Stopped caring what her friends were doing, what they were saying, what they were building. I worked. I had a small team, 3 people at the start of that period, then 5, then 8. We were building infrastructure software for mid-market logistics companies. Not glamorous. Not the kind of thing that got covered in the breathless startup press that Lauren had loved reading over breakfast. But it worked. The product solved a real problem and solved it better than anything else in the market at that price point. In month 4 after the breakup, we signed our first enterprise client. In month 7, we closed a seed round. Not enormous, but real. And it came from people who'd done their homework and believed in the model. I remember the night the term sheet came through. I was at my kitchen table, cup of coffee going cold beside the laptop. 11:47 p.m. I read it 3 times. Then I sat back, thought about that dinner for exactly 30 seconds. Then I went back to reading the document. Month 9, we had a product that was scaling faster than we'd projected. The team grew. We moved into a real office. Small, but ours. I hired a head of sales who'd previously worked at a company 10 times our size and believed in what we were doing enough to take a lower base for more equity. That was the first moment I thought, this is actually going to be something. Not because of the hire itself, but because of what it meant that someone with options chose us. Month 11, we were in conversations with 3 different strategic acquirers. I didn't tell anyone outside the core team. No announcements. No LinkedIn posts about exciting news on the horizon. Just quiet work and careful conversations, and a lawyer I trusted. The media attention started before we intended it to. A business reporter at a trade publication had gotten wind of the acquisition talks through a source I never identified. She called my PR contact on a Thursday afternoon. We decided to get ahead of it. The announcement went out on a Monday morning. Full acquisition. Strategic buyer. Number undisclosed, but the trade press speculated, and they speculated correctly within about 15%. By 9 a.m., it was in 3 business publications. By noon, it had been picked up broadly. By 3 p.m., my phone had received 47 text messages from numbers I hadn't contacted in over a year. The first one that made me stop was from Connor. Dude, is this actually your company? The logistics infrastructure thing? I just saw it on the news feed. That's incredible, man. Genuinely. Then Jess. Elliot, oh my God. I just saw the article. This is huge. Congrats. Then someone I barely knew from Lauren's extended friend group, whose name I had to look up in my contacts. Hey, So incredible what you've built. So well-deserved. Would love to catch up sometime. I read them slowly. Set the phone face down. Picked it up again an hour later. There was a message from Dana. Elliot, I know things ended weird between you and Lauren, and we probably aren't close anymore, but I just wanted to say congratulations. You deserved better than how things went. I'm really happy for you. I appreciated that one. I replied to Dana. Thanked her. Meant it. The others I left on read. Not out of bitterness. Just because there wasn't anything to say that needed saying. I heard about Lauren's reaction secondhand. I wasn't looking for it. It came through a mutual acquaintance, someone on the periphery of that whole circle who reached out with genuine warmth and, at the end, mentioned it almost as an aside. Lauren saw the article. She was at some brunch thing with friends when someone pulled it up on their phone. I waited. Apparently, she just went quiet. Like, really quiet. For a while. I didn't ask for more details. I didn't need them. I understood the specific feeling of something landing in your chest that you can't argue with. The particular silence that follows a realization arriving too late to be useful. I hope she was okay. I genuinely did. But I also recognized, quietly and without drama, that whatever she was feeling in that moment was the natural conclusion of choices she'd made with full information. She had known who I was. She had decided it wasn't enough. That was her right. What wasn't within her control was who I became after she made that call. About 3 weeks after the announcement, I was at a small dinner, the kind that happens after these things, where people in the industry want to acknowledge the milestone, and you go because the relationships matter even if the celebration feels slightly surreal. Lauren was not there, but Brett was. Different context entirely. He had some tangential connection to one of the investors in the room. That's how these circles work. We made eye contact across the room. He walked over. Elliot. He extended his hand. Firm grip. Bigger smile than I remembered him having. Huge news. Congratulations, man. Seriously impressive exit. Thank you, I said. You know, I always thought you had something going on. That dinner, God, that was what, a year ago? More? I remember thinking you were clearly working on something real. I looked at him. He held the look for a second, then smiled wider, the way people do when they're waiting to see if you'll let them rewrite history out loud. Good to see you, Brett, I said. I turned back to the conversation I'd been having. I'll tell you what success actually feels like, because I think the version in movies and the version in real life are fairly different. It doesn't feel like vindication. Not in the sharp, satisfying way you imagine when you're at your lowest point. It feels quieter than that. It feels like a morning about 6 weeks after the announcement when I woke up early in my new apartment. A different one, better neighborhood. The kind of place that has the light in the morning that makes you feel like you're supposed to be doing something, and made coffee and sat by the window. And I thought about that dinner. Not with anger. Not with satisfaction exactly. With something more like clarity. I thought about the way Lauren had said it. Sweet doesn't build extraordinary lives. The confidence of it. The casual certainty that she understood what extraordinary required and had measured me against that standard and found me insufficient. I thought about how that moment had felt. And I thought about how different the same information looks depending on which side of a timeline you're standing on. She had been looking at who I was at that moment. I had been looking at who I was becoming. Neither of us was wrong about what we saw. We were just looking at different things. She reached out 6 weeks after the announcement. A text message. Short. Hey, I saw the news about the company. I wanted to say congratulations. You worked really hard and it clearly paid off. I hope you're well. I read it 3 times. Then I put the phone down and went back to what I was doing. I replied 2 days later. Thank you. I hope you're well too. That was it. She replied once more. Something about how she'd always believed in me. Really, and she hoped maybe we could grab coffee sometime and catch up. I read that one. Didn't respond. Not because I wanted her to feel a specific way, but because the conversation she was looking for didn't exist anymore. She wanted to sit across from me and revise the narrative. Wanted to reclaim some warmth from a relationship that had ended precisely because the warmth had stopped being mutual. I understood the impulse. But understanding it didn't mean I owed it the space she was looking for. There's a version of this story where I meet her for coffee, where we have a careful, adult conversation about what went wrong and what we both could have done differently, and we part ways with something that looks like closure. I've thought about that version. It's not the one that happened. What happened instead was simpler and, honestly, better. I kept building. After the acquisition, I took 6 months. Traveled a little. Read more than I had in years. Let my brain breathe. Then I started something new. Different space. Harder problem. The kind of thing that keeps you up at night not from anxiety, but from the particular electricity of a real question you don't have the answer to yet. The team is small again, back to the beginning in some ways. But the beginning feels different when you know what you've already proven to yourself. That's the part nobody tells you about success when you're sitting at a restaurant table absorbing a comment designed to diminish you. It's not about proving anything to anyone else. It never was. The people at that table, Lauren, Brett, Dana, Connor, Jess, they were never the audience. They were just the noise I had to get quiet enough to stop hearing. Dana and I actually had coffee a few months ago. She'd split from Connor, was doing something new professionally. She was sharp and funny and nothing like the version of herself I'd known through Lauren's social circle. Toward the end of the coffee, she said, "Can I say something kind of honest?" I told her to go ahead. I knew that night, at the dinner, when she said that thing, I knew immediately it was wrong. Not just mean. Wrong. Like, factually incorrect about who you were. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything, she continued. And I've thought about that since. I should have said something. It wouldn't have changed anything, I said. Maybe not. But still. I appreciated her saying it. It didn't rewrite the evening. But it confirmed something I'd suspected, that the silence around that table hadn't been agreement. Some of it had just been people not willing to spend social capital on someone else's moment. Which is human. And costly. And something worth remembering the next time you're sitting at a table and someone says something that deserves a response. I was at a conference about 2 months ago. One of those mid-size industry things where the speaker list is good and the coffee is bad, and you end up having 3 conversations in the hallway that are worth more than anything that happened on stage. Someone I didn't know came up to me between sessions. Young, mid-20s. The kind of nervous energy that means they'd been building up to the approach. "Sorry to just come up to you," he said. "I know this is random, but I read about your company. Both of them, actually. The acquisition and what you're building now." "Yeah," I said. "I'm working on something. Early stage. And honestly, sometimes it's really hard to keep believing in it when other people don't seem to see it yet." He paused. "I just wanted to ask, how did you keep going when nobody thought it was going to work?" I looked at him for a second. Thought about that dinner. Thought about the drive home in silence. Thought about the Tuesday night in Brooklyn when the term sheet came through and I was alone at my kitchen table and there was nobody there to hand a glass to and say we did it. I stopped waiting for people to see it. I said, "The work either is what it is or it isn't. Other people's vision of it is secondary to what's actually true about it." He nodded slowly. "Also," I said, "find people who are building something too. Not people who measure your work against their timeline. People who understand the work itself." He thanked me. I meant what I told him. I think about Lawrence sometimes. Less than I used to. But sometimes. Not with bitterness. That phase was brief and I moved through it quickly. Mostly because bitterness is expensive and I had things to spend my energy on. I think about the 2 years when things were good. They were actually good. She was funny and warm, and she could make a room feel more alive just by laughing at the right moment. That was real. I think about the moment things shifted. I'm still not entirely sure what caused it. A combination of things. Her own fear about the future, her social circle, and the specific values it reinforced. The way comparison is a slow poison that you don't notice until it's altered your entire perception of someone. I don't think she was a bad person. I think she made a choice based on information she had at the time, and the choice was wrong, and she'll live with that in whatever way people live with the things they got wrong. I hope it's not a heavy thing for her. But I stopped being responsible for her relationship with her own choices the night I paid the check, smiled at the table, and quietly decided that some things don't deserve a response in the moment. They deserve something slower. They deserve you simply becoming what you already knew you were. The last time I thought about that dinner with any real weight was a few weeks ago. I was being interviewed for a piece in a business publication. The journalist was good, the kind who actually reads the background material and asks questions that require real answers. Near the end, she asked about the early days, what it felt like when nobody knew the company name, whether there were moments of doubt. I told her there were. She asked if there was a specific moment when I decided to double down, when something shifted from uncertainty to commitment. I thought about it. I thought about a restaurant in the West Village. Exposed brick, overpriced pasta, candlelight that made everything feel more significant. I thought about a comment made with a smile. "Yeah," I said. "There was a moment." "What happened?" I smiled. "Someone told me sweet doesn't build extraordinary lives." The journalist looked at me, waiting. "Turns out," I said, "they were almost right." She laughed. I left it there. Some stories don't need the ending explained. By the time she believed in what I was building, I no longer needed her to. And that, more than any number in any article, was the only extraordinary thing about any of it.